Hi, welcome to Anchor Point. I'm Dr. Aly Norman, and today I'm going to be presenting a research presentation about my own research, which is the Heads Together project. This is a collaborative project that runs across several different organisations within the UK and is sponsored by the National Institute for Health and Social Care Research, particularly the social care branch of this. The Heads Together project is designed to enable the training needs of social workers within the UK. What we've seen from anecdotal evidence is that social workers often don't have a good grounding of understanding about the different issues that impact on people with a brain injury and also on their family members. So the 2-year project has been looking at how we can fill the gaps in that knowledge and create some kind of toolkit that would be used long term for people's training. One of the things that we often get asked in the area of brain injury is why this is so important. Why should we care about brain injury? And we've done several different presentations for Anchor Point over the last year or so, looking at the different statistics. I think one of the most impressive or scary, if you like, is that it is the leading cause of death and disability for individuals aged 0 to 40. So what we've got is a substantial number of children and young people who are affected by ABI and will continue to be affected by ABI into their adulthood. What we see is that there is a shorter lifespan for individuals who have a brain injury, that there is often issues in terms of their ability to access effective social care and support after they leave hospital. Family members tell us that they are often overlooked following brain injury. And one of the things that's most interesting is that brain injury is not an area that is routinely used within social work, included within social work training. So I'm going to talk you through some of the work packages. We've had 5 or 6 different work packages that we've been looking at over the course of the project. I'm going to start with the very first one, which we began right back 2 years ago. When the project began in 2022. And what we were doing was we were looking at a systematic scoping review to understand how social work literature, so academic literature, viewed brain injury and the kinds of difficulties that it was representing there. This was headed up by Dr. Mark Linden, who is one of the researchers that works at Queen's Belfast in University in Northern Ireland. And a team of us were working on looking at what we see in terms of the number of papers that are included and what kind of information exists within those papers about brain injury. So having reviewed over 1,000 different papers, what we found was 17 that actually met the inclusion criteria. So these were papers that were based around some form of brain injury and how to work with individuals within a brain injury arena. The different themes that came out of this paper were, firstly, the need for advocacy in social work. So what we were seeing from the papers was that actually individuals with brain injuries don't always necessarily know how to express their needs well to social work professionals. So there's a need for advocacy. Training and multidisciplinary team working were identified as another thing. So actually, there needed to be more training, and that training needed to include other professionals so that social workers get a better sense of how to work within a multidisciplinary team to support the needs of brain injury survivors and their families. Social networks was another thing. So this was really important that family members were included in assessments, in access to support and information, and generally considered when social workers are involved with clients. And then finally, we saw this aspect around a theme around social barriers, societal barriers, which looked at some of the factors that may be influencing why social workers struggle to engage with individuals with brain injury. The paper was published last year, and there's a link to it there if anyone's interested in looking at the full paper. The next project, which started in the middle of 2022, was a survey of all the different organisations in the UK, within England and also out in wider parts of the UK that host social work training. So these are predominantly universities, but there are also some apprenticeship providers as well. This was led by Caroline Bald, who is one of the researchers at University of Essex, which is where the project is predominantly based. So what we found from the survey findings was that social work educators were telling us that in most cases brain injury was not included within their syllabus routinely. Where it was included because there was particular expert information or knowledge within the team around brain injury specifically. And quite often that, even when it was a knowledge base of the individuals, the professors teaching on the programs, it consisted of only very short teaching sessions, possibly even as short as one lecture. And in terms of continuing professional development, once people had left initial training and went into the workplace, there was very limited access indeed to brain injury training. So this told us that it was a really important thing to be looking at how we could actually include social work training around brain injury as part of the pre-qualification syllabus, and also the CPD post-qualifying as well. The third package was the one that I headed up alongside Dr. Mark Holloway from Head First case management company. This particular project was looking at what the experiences of social workers have been around working with people with brain injuries and their families, what their perspective and understanding of brain injury was, and what their beliefs around the training needs that they might have were. So we interviewed 3 different groups. One was newly qualified social workers who've been in post no longer than about 18 months. We also interviewed specialist social workers. These are individuals who had a long experience with brain injury specifically and had areas of specialist knowledge around it. And we also interviewed team leaders and commissioners who were working within social care. What people told us was that they were aware that, in fact, every social worker is a brain injury social worker, because all of them had come into contact in some way with individuals with brain injuries. This was to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the individual. When we started to talk to them within the interviews about the sort of representations of brain injury, it became very apparent to some of the newly qualified social workers that they had perhaps seen more cases of brain injury than they had been aware of, identifying that quite often in this field, it's not necessarily brain injury that's the presenting problem to social workers. Social workers told us that they had a really important role to play in terms of safeguarding, risk assessment, and understanding mental capacity legislation, and that actually what they were finding was that they didn't have the knowledge or the skills base to apply those things within a brain injury field. So we asked a series of questions to elicit this sort of information. So we wanted to know about their knowledge base, the kind of training that they'd received already, ways in which they integrate and apply their knowledge, but also things like what the barriers might be to having social work education around brain injury, and what kind of support organisations and managers might need in order to be able to develop better practice for brain injury. So we had a large cohort. We had 9 individuals who were specialist social workers, 3 commissioners, 2 team leaders, and 5 newly qualified social workers as part of the team. And we analysed the data using thematic analysis. It's a very complex data set. There was a lot of information given, and these are the outlines and themes here. And I'm going to brush over this relatively quickly because we don't have time to go into what looks like a very complicated diagram here today. One of the things that our social workers were telling us was that that they felt that the modern movement within social work had shifted away from this idea of good old-fashioned social work, where skills were based around practical skills, interpersonal skills, and the need for professional curiosity. So actually digging deeper with the client rather than taking the information that they've told you at face value. They felt that there were also some issues around. There was this sense that actually clients needed to be motivated and self-determined to be able to access social work, which was a particular problem for individuals with brain injuries if they have things like executive impairments, where actually they may not necessarily be able to show that self-determination. There was also a sense that there were some systemic issues within current modern social work. These were linked then with some of the problems that are down on the bottom left here. So to do with the fights that social workers felt that they were constantly having within their own services around a lack of long-term social work, so not being able to work with people for more than a few weeks or a few months at any given time. Having a huge volume of work, so they were very time poor. There was a lack of staffing, which meant that most of them were overwhelmed with the requirements of their job. That there was little focus on the social aspect of social work, so that family orientation, thinking about people as they come as part of a family network, had started to be lost due to time constraints and staffing issues. They felt that most of these issues were a result of poor investment within adult social care. I felt that actually what was needed was a wider multidisciplinary approach to training and integrated with health and social care in terms of support on the ground. This fed into this particular theme about that and the difficulties that individuals identified to us with that integrative approach, particularly where brain injury is concerned, where it's often viewed through a medical lens of being a medical condition that needs to be dealt with by medical professionals, rather than being something that impacts on people psychologically and socially as well. And one of the particular difficulties that was highlighted was the need for greater information sharing. The key theme of advocacy came up here again. The social workers were telling us about the need for clients to be able to have advocates so that they got access to the support that they needed because they weren't necessarily able to self-advocate. They talked about brain injury being a multifaceted and huge area that had to be covered. They talked about the fact that systems within social care are quite complex now, which meant that they don't necessarily fit within one box, so they quite often fall between the gaps in different services. Social workers seem very aware of the fact that a lot of clients were marginalised and judged because they had other issues outside of their brain injuries, so may have drug and alcohol problems, for example, or mental health issues, or might have anger management problems or be aggressive. They felt that there was a need to prioritise brain injury awareness and training and social work support at a national level. They described brain injury as being a hidden condition, something that we don't necessarily see, with individuals requiring very specific kinds of social care needs that are different from other populations. In terms of training specifically, our experts told us that even those that were involved in specialist brain injury services, they had had little to no on-the-job training around brain injury themselves. And actually, most of their training was self-directed, that they had to find information out when they came across individuals who they were working with. They felt that they wanted to have a lot more real-world training that actually included real examples of brain injury and coming into contact with real people. They felt the need to have more brain injury-related placements and asked this question of why not brain injury. And they talked very openly about the fact that things like mental health and learning disabilities and dementia are already included within mainstream curriculum for pre-qualification training in social work. And yet brain injury, the leading cause of death and disability in people under the age of 40, was not represented. They then gave us a really nice outline of the types of training tools that they would like to see. So they wanted some very basic information about how the brain worked and how to work with people with brain injuries. Wider toolkit or a kind of Google directory for all things brain injury for social workers. They wanted lots of examples of experts by experience and how their stories had impacted upon them. And then also an area where there would be specialist knowledge, which was more focused on the complex social work issues that they tend to deal with, such as mental capacity, and also how neurorehabilitation might work. So there was lots of really interesting things that came from the data, and what we were seeing was individuals telling us that there was a real need for this training and that they wanted to see it incorporated more widely within social work training across the UK, both pre-qualification, but also as part of a CPD-based approach, and that ideally that should be something that was integrated with other health and social care learning. So then moving on to our next work package, we've got the Experts by Experience group, and I'm really pleased to have been able to head this particular group up. So One of the things that's pretty standard now within the UK and elsewhere is the need to include experts by experience. So people have lived experience of a condition as part of health-related grants. But quite often this can be a bit of a tick box exercise rather than a proper inclusion of individuals who have those particular experiences. I'm pleased to say that's certainly not what we had with our group. Had a range of individuals, so some had brain injuries, some were family members of individuals with brain injuries, and some were social workers, some were social workers with brain injuries, some were social workers who were family members as well. So a real mix of individuals who were able to provide personal stories, personal insights into the sorts of things that social workers should be interested in, but also very practical examples of how we should be going about training social workers in the future. So they've been really helpful in all aspects of designing different areas of study. That very complex diagram that I just talked you through before was something that they worked with me on in order to finalize the data analysis, and they were very useful in terms of providing insights into what we were looking at with the data. They've developed a lot of lived experience materials that will go into the final toolkit and have a very interesting shared love of ducks across the group. I won't present on this bit to do with Kate and Steph. This was something that we produced for our live event that we had in March. You can see that by going to the BizWig website and pulling down the information there. So if you are interested, then please do. Or if you want a shorter Vimeo, which is looking at us talking as an experts by experience group about the experience of being in the Heads Together project, then please do follow the link on the screen now. The final area that we've been working on outside of the toolkit has been the Making Headway play. And so Headway Essex, which is one of the local Headway groups, developed a play called Making Headway from some scripts of client stories, gathered together into really short vignettes and then put together into a large play, which represented what it's like to live with a brain injury, but also to be a family member affected by brain injury. Now, Headway Essex have been showcasing the play elsewhere alongside Packing Shed Theatre Company, who were the producers of the play and also have provided the actors. But we've been using the play in a very specific way within our project in order to understand whether or not we can use the play itself or digital recordings of vignettes from within the play to act as a interprofessional learning tool to improve social workers' knowledge of brain injury, but also then incorporating that within a multidisciplinary learning environment with other specialists such as speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists, nurses. So it's been quite a big project that we've run across several different universities. So we presented the play twice at University of Essex, once at Leeds and once at Canterbury. And we did another interprofessional learning event that didn't include the play, that was based down where I am at the University of Plymouth. And we're hoping that this is something that we will be able to continue in the future. And in fact, excitingly, already have some dates booked in for next year to continue delivering some form of interprofessional learning events. So that's the Heads Together project in a nutshell. Once we have the final toolkit, then I'm hoping that I'll be able to present on that for you as well. So watch this space and we'll be in touch once we have an opportunity. And please follow the link if you want to see the full webinar that we produced about this particular bit of research. Thanks for joining.